Um, Today we're gonna learn modern art after the 17th and 18th, the Baroque and the Rococo art. The modern art arose. The modernity in Europe and North America reflected the emergence of a new kind of society in the wake of the French, American, and industrial revolutions. So driven by technological progress and characterized by rapid change, the 19th century gave birth to our industrialized middle-class culture of mass production, mass advertising, and mass consumption, including the mass consumption of leisure activities such as shopping, going to entertainments, and visiting art museum. The art museums themselves were a development of the 19th century, and they made art available to the public in a way we now take for granted. The first national museum was the Louvre in Paris. Art was now for everybody, no longer by the church or by the nobility. That is the huge difference for the modern art. So many of scholars agree that modern art started from the Louvre Museum's foundation in 1793, and it ended after World War II, like this. So this time period from the Louvre Museum's foundation to the end of the World War II, we can say it's modern art period. And after this period, we can say that it's a post-modern art or contemporary art period. So the modern art is divided by two here. So before the avant-garde and after the avant-garde. We learned the photography before, right? And the first photograph in the world, daguerreotype, came out to the world during this modern time period. Excuse me. As photograph had developed, many artists abandoned the traditional art style and they tried new art styles because traditional art was not meaningful anymore thanks to the invention of camera. That also happened during this time period. But the beginning of the modern art movements were still realistic and their arts were based on observation. Because the photograph's development was just a baby step and it wasn't threatening for the painters. However, after daguerreotype, the photograph's development was accelerated, and by the 1888, Kodak was invented. They invented the portable camera, and everyone could record their mundane life. So the artist needed something new rather than the realistic art. That art movement is called avant-garde, means newest art. So the after avant-garde, the art history began to write totally different story. So before the avant-garde, there were three major art movements: realism, impressionism, and post-impressionism. And after the avant-garde, diverse art movements arose: Fauvism, Expressionism, Cubism, Futurism, Dada, Surrealism, and Idealism. Today, we are going to see the art movements before the avant-garde, the realism, impressionism, and post-impressionism. So let's see the realism first. So a number of artists broke away from the traditions of earlier 18th and 19th century art to create objective representations of the real world. The movement called realism refers specifically to writers and artists in France who were concerned about achieving social change after the revolution of 1848. Realist artists sought to depict the everyday and the ordinary rather than the historic, heroic, or the exotic. So their works unmasked for art viewers the true lives of the middle and the lower classes. So this is a realism artist, Honor Darmius lithographic printing work of art. And we saw this work when we learned contextual analysis before. So we're going to just skip this work. And let's see this another realism work of art. So so remember, let's just remind what we learned last class. So we learned the Baroque and the Rococo, and before the Baroque and the Rococo, we learned the Renaissance, right? And think about that artwork, and then what's the difference, from what's the difference? What kind of differences can you find for this work of art compared to the old the arts?
Right. So with the realism, it just seems like the everyday person, whereas before it was very high class, very sophisticated.
Yes, yes, exactly. Very good, Yu-Chan. Very good. So when we learned the Baroque and the Rococo art, the artists depict the biblical episode or the novel's daily life, right? However, in the modern period, the realism artists, they depicted the middle or even the lower classes mundane life. That is the huge difference. So this painting.
Right.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. The Rococo is more like, I wouldn't say Hasidity, but it explains it as being more like joyful and having a more pleasurous feeling
Yes.
and image expression.
Very good. Very good. So Mike, what are they doing here?
It looks like they're breaking down stones.
Yes, yes, exactly. So see, that's the huge difference. So this painting, the Stonebrokers, was shocking for its depiction of working class people on a large size canvas. Look at the size. It's a very large size canvas. So a scale normally reserved for the heroic subject matter of history paintings. The artist, the Corvus, this painting highlights the backbreaking and monotonous work of art, work of the poor. The breaking of stones was a job taught by older generations to the young men, and it was a job a man would have for a lifetime. So the painting shows an older worker and his young assistant as powerful and unrelenting qualities that alarmed the upper classes. And a year before Corbett painted this work, in the revolution working conditions and to low pay. So, and let's move on to the Impressionism. In terms of the theme issue, the Impressionism sought the similar theme with the realism, but the technique and the colors expression is slightly different with the realism. So the artists who came to be called Impressionists worked in individual and sometimes very different styles, but they were united and rejected the formal approach of the art taught in the academy in Paris. So still in the modern time, most of the traditional academy, the art academy, they taught the traditional art style like the Renaissance and the Baroque or the Rococo art styles. But the for the resistance of the traditional art, the Impressionism arose. So their art attempted not so much to portray exactly and realistically such scenes as a landscape or life in a city, as to capture the light and the sensations produced by the scene. The Impressionists formed a group to show their work together outside the official salon in 8 exhibitions held between 1874 and 1886. So their subject matter was scenes of everyday life, such as rural landscapes and life in modern and growing cities of France. Impresses were often intent on capturing the essence of moment in time. So before the Impressionists, artists who followed the traditional method of painting gave their work a smooth surface. Impressionists, on the other hand, closed to reveal their brush strokes. So the almost, sketchy, unfinished appearance of many Impressionist works breaks away from the academic tradition of implying, creating an illusion of three-dimensional space on the canvas. Instead, Impressionists flattened the space, welcomed the texture created by the paint, and often allowed the canvas to be seen beneath the painting. So many Impressionist paintings do indeed have an apparently unfinished quality because the artists are interested in capturing instantaneous moments rather than creating a highly finished, technically flawless piece of work. So we're going to see the 3 Impressionist artists, and this is the first Impressionist artist we are going to see today, Edward Manet. He was a French modernist painter, and he was one of the first 19th century artists to paint modern life and pivotal figure in the transition from realism to Impressionism. So let's talk about this painting. So everyone look at this painting closer, and can you read this painting? Can you find the artist's intention through this painting? What you can see here.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Okay, so let's just talk about this painting. Can you read this painting? Can you guess the artist's intention of this painting?
I think it's 2 women and 2 men.
Yes, there are 2 women and 2 men. Yes.
It looks like one is bathing in like a lake or a pond, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. So what are they doing here?
Maybe they want to take a breakfast.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a launching
Yes. Yes.
at the grass. I think the outside the air. It seemed like that the same lady who's sitting, that's the same one over there on the, like, I don't know. It seemed like her.
It's actually different
Oh, okay.
persons.
They also have food on the ground.
Yeah, so maybe they went on a picnic.
Yes.
Yeah, lunching.
Yes. Very good guess. Yes. But everyone,
But
it's
I don't understand why she's nude.
Yeah.
you got the point. Yes. Yes. Manet's paintings are very hard to read. Yeah. So for this painting, why this front woman is naked?
And then the guy was suit on.
Yeah, and posed like that. And where she is looking at, it feels like she's staring at us, right? And why these 2 men are dressed up and act like there are only 2 of them? And what is the woman back there? Now, she seems like taking a bath there, right? So seems like there's no relationship between the figures in this painting. So Manet's painting is odd, and art historians still debate just what he meant by it. In the modeling his figures, he focused on the highest and the lowest values, all but the eliminating the middle transitional tones. So as a result, the forms such as the nude woman's body appear flattened, as though illuminated by a sudden flash of light. So,
Professor, what if this image or this painting was an impression or an expression of the women maybe feeling naked in front of the 2 men in thought, and maybe the other woman's thoughts were so impure that she may have thought that she would have rather cleansed herself or cooled herself down in the pond instead of thinking the thoughts that she was thinking.
oh wow. Oh, I love that, Mike. Oh wow. Yes. Yes. You know what? So we can just freely feel from the works in that intention, even though we cannot read the exact intention from the by the artist, but yes, yeah, you can guess like that. Very good. I love the interpretation. Love it. So I'm gonna share a video about this painting in detail, even though the video also cannot give us the answer of the artist's intention, but it's going to be a huge help to understand of this painting.
We're in the Musée d'Orsay, looking at Déjeuner sur l'herbe, Luncheon on the Grass.
By Manet, although it didn't originally have that title. Its first title was The Bath.
And there is really neither bathing nor a luncheon going on. There is a woman in the distance in the water. There is some fruit and a brioche or roll in the foreground, so perhaps a remnant of a lunch, but that's not what this painting is about.
But it's very difficult to determine precisely what this painting is about, and I think that's part of the point. The painting was exhibited not at the official salon sanctioned by the Royal Academy of Fine Arts, the authority for art. Instead, this was exhibited at the Salon des Refugiés.
The Salon des Refugiés was set up by Emperor Napoleon III because so many works of art had been excluded from the official salon. But even though this painting was in the exhibition of rejected artwork, it still caused a storm of controversy based both on what was being portrayed, but also its painting technique, how it was portrayed.
These figures are clearly modern Parisian figures.
And that's the problem.
They're not set far away in ancient Greek and Roman mythology or set back in time. These are figures clearly wearing fashionable Parisian clothing, except, of course, the nude woman, which is the other part of the problem.
By placing a woman who is nude in this context, and because she's not veiled or distanced by mythology, she's not a nymph in a classical grove, she is actually a recognizable figure. This is Manet's model, Victorine Moron. And because the two men are also recognizable figures, there is an immediacy here that creates a degree of discomfort for the viewer.
These figures don't look idealized. They don't look timeless. They look like actual people you would see on the streets of Paris. The other significant problem with these three figures is that no one seems to be truly interacting. The nude female figure looks directly out at us in a gaze that is very nonchalant and yet very direct.
Which is also breaking with tradition. In the rare instances where a nude female figure would look out toward the audience, it might be with a coy look. But here there is a figure that's returning the viewer's gaze.
And then we have the two male figures. The figure on the right gestures toward the figure in the center, but the figure in the center seems to gaze absently out of the painting and doesn't seem to return the figure on the right's gesture and conversation. And then we have this odd figure in the background who's spatially too large for where she should be in the middle ground.
There are all kinds of spatial problems here that Manet has built in. These are not happenstance, these are purposeful. For example, the woman in the background seems to reach down to scoop something out of the water, but in fact, she seems to be reaching down to the thumb of the man in the foreground, collapsing the last traces of the illusion of depth.
We also have figures who are rendered very flatly. So, for example, the nude female figure is not modeled with that lovely movement from light to dark that would give her a sense of three-dimensionality that is typical of representations of the female nude historically. Critics noted that she seemed to have a kind of studio lighting about her instead of the natural outdoor light of where she's located.
There is some minor modeling around the breast, under the thigh, but for the most part, she looks like she's a flat cutout.
And even those shadows are very dark. There's almost a sense of her being outlined in dark grays and blacks instead of a lovely soft modeling. Overall, the handling of paint, whether we're looking at the grass in the foreground or the meadow in the distance, it's incredibly loosely brushed. There's no sense of finish. And for paintings that were approved by the jury for the Royal Academy, having a painting that was really worked on, where there was no sense left of the hand of the artist, that was the priority. And Manet's just flagrantly disregarding that. We also have a figure who seems naked and not nude. And that's because we have her discarded clothing, including her hat in the foreground, and the fact that she's wearing a kind of ribbon. So we feel as though she's a modern Parisian woman who has discarded her clothing and not Venus, born nude naturally from the sea.
She's not an allegorical figure. She's not a mythological figure. She's somebody who has taken off her dress.
Manet is very consciously drawing on the tradition of art history here.
He understood traditional art. He had copied paintings at the Louvre.
And so this painting is based directly on at least two sources. A painting that was thought to be by Giorgione, now understood to be by Titian in the Louvre, which similarly shows two clothed male figures and two nude female figures in a beautiful landscape.
But Déjeuner sur l'Herbe is also inspired by a work by Raphael that Manet had seen through an engraved copy showing the Judgment of Paris, and in the lower right corner of that engraving were two river gods and a nymph, and it was that composition that Manet has borrowed.
So we can easily understand the reactions of the French public in 1863 when they went to the Salon des Refugiés. In fact, Manet was cultivating their confusion. This refusal to tell a story is a refusal to do precisely what the Academy and especially the art-going public wanted from a painting.
Manet is teasing his viewers. He's giving all of the indications that there's a narrative and yet not including that narrative. And so the subject is then no longer what is being enacted, but rather the act of creating a work of art itself, the choices that he's making as an artist to his brushwork, to his composition.
He is making a challenge to the authorities that controlled art in France and making a strong declaration. I am the one who makes these decisions for my art.
And that forceful declaration will have a tremendous impact on the development of modernism in the late 19th century and into the 20th century.
All right. How was it? Was it a help? Was it a help to understand that work?
Yeah, it was definitely impressionistic.
Yes. All right. So in this painting, we saw this painting before, right? So we're gonna just skip this painting. And then we're gonna move on to the next impressionist artist, Claude Monet. Claude Monet stands like no other painter for the impressionist style and as the French master of light, and he was also a central pioneer of 20th century painting. When Monet traveled to Paris to visit the Louvre Museum, he witnessed the painters copying from the old masters, like the Renaissance and the Baroque and the Rococo's work of art. However, Monet brought his paints and the other tools with him and sit by a window and paint what he saw there. So Monet was in Paris for several years and met several artists who would become friends and fellow impressionists. One of those friends was Edward Monet. We just saw it. So this painting's title is Impression Sunrise by the Claude Monet, which is first shown at what would become known as the Exhibition of the Impressionists in Paris in April 1874. The painting is credited with inspiring the name of the Impressionist movement. So Impression Sunrise depicts a port in Monet's hometown. The Monet painted same subjects in many times because the lights and the sceneries are different by the time, the day, and the weather. And he liked to paint the natural, the nature views outside to capture all the difference of lighting while he was painting. And here's another beautiful landscape painting. Also, he used the brush stroke speed to show the time in his painting. Through this painting, we even could feel the windy weather because of the brushes strokes. And Monet was diagnosed with nuclear cataracts in both eyes in 1912 at the age of 72. His visual problems began much earlier. Soon after the age of 65, he began to experience changes in his perception of color. In his eye, everything looked blurry and yellowish and brownish to him. So after he was diagnosed cataracts, he spent most of his time at his garden. So this is his garden's view, very beautiful. So, and he left so many beautiful garden landscape paintings, and he died at 86. So I'm gonna share one more video to show his beautiful garden with the paintings. In 1 second, let me pause the video. All right, let's move on to the last Impressionist artist, Auguste Renoir. The Renoir was a French artist who was a leading painter in the development of the Impressionist style. He depicted beauty and especially feminine sensuality. So this painting is one of the Impressionism's most celebrated masterpieces. The painting depicts a typical Sunday afternoon at the original Moulin de Margaret in the district of Montmartre in Paris. In the late 19th century, working class Parisians would dress up and spend time there dancing, drinking, and eating, just like our life.
It seemed like they all have on the same color hats.
Yeah, maybe that was, their, trends at that time. And this is another portrait painting. So this is unusual. I'm sorry. So this is we can see the brush strokes on her hair. It looks very soft, but it looks very alive. It's a very beautiful portrait painting. And this portrait painting is unusual portrait style in terms of the composition. The composition is not focusing on the figures nor the landscape. Even the kid doesn't show full torso in this painting because he tried to make a unique portrait composition in this painting. And Renoir showed the completed technique as impressionist through his paintings. There is a video about his life with his masterpieces in the Mood Room. So please watch the video to fully understand the artist. And now let's move on to the last art movement before the avant-garde, post-impressionist. So the next generation of artists admired many aspects of Impressionism, especially its brightened palette and direct painting technique. But they reacted in various ways to what they perceived as its shortcomings. Their styles are so highly personal that we commonly group them together under the neutral term post-impressionist, meaning simply the artist who came after Impressionism. So we are going to see three post-impressionism artists. The first artist is Georges Seurat. We saw him in the different chapters. And the next artist is Vincent van Gogh. He is one of the post-impressionist artists. And the last artist is going to be Paul Gauguin. So let's see Georges Seurat first. Georges Seurat wanted to place Impressionism's intuitive recording of optical sensations on a more scientific footing. His reading of color theories led him to develop the technique of pointillism, in which discrete dots and dashes of pure complementary colors were supposed to blend in the viewer's eyes. Do you remember this painting? So we learned his artistic technique in visual elements chapter, right? For the optical color mixture. So he painted all the colors with color dots but he didn't use direct colors, and he used optical color mixture. So for example, to make the green color for the breast, he used the yellow dots and the blue dots. When the lots of color dots put together, they create new colors by the viewer's eyes. And the next artist, post-impressionist artist, is Vincent van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh was a Dutch post-impressionist painter who is among the most famous and influential figures in the history of Western art. In just over a decade, he created about 2,100 artworks, including around 860 oil paintings, and most of which dates from the last 2 years of his life, which is amazing. So they include landscapes, still lifes, portraits, and self-portraits, and are characterized by bold colors and dramatic, impulsive, and expressive brushstroke that contributed to the foundations of modern art. Sadly, he was not commercially successful, and he suicided at 37, came after years of mental illness and poverty. The Starry Night is one of the most recognized paintings in the history of Western culture. It described the view from the east-facing window of asylum room just before sunrise, with the addition of an ideal village. This is his self-portrait when he had ear. And this is his bedroom painting. So there is a video about this painting in detail. So in the Moodle room, so please watch it after this meeting. And this is another his self-portrait painting after he lost his ear. He began to hallucinate and suffered attacks in which he lost consciousness. And during one of these attacks, he used the knife to cut his ear. He could later recall nothing about the event. And the last post-impressionist artist is Paul Gauguin. Paul Gauguin worked in an impressionist style early in his career. Gauguin was interested in expressing a spiritual meaning in his art. All these he sought on the sun-drenched island of the South Pacific, where he journeyed to escape what he called the disease of civilization. So this is one of his famous painting, Titan. The brilliant high-key colors of his Titan paintings reveal his depth to Impressionism. To this lightened palette, he added his own innovations, such as flattened forms and broad colors areas, strong outlines, tertiary color harmonies, a taste for the exotic, an aura of mystery, and quest for primitive. The woman's pose is derived from Egyptian art. So the legs shown in profile and shoulders depicted frontally. Gauguin believed that European art had been in thrall for too long to the legacy of Greece and Rome, and he looked to the art of Egypt, Islam, and Asia to renew it. There's another video about Paul Gauguin based on his journal he left. in the Moodle room. So please watch this video to understand this artist's creative viewpoint. So we are going to continue to see the modern art movement after the avant-garde in the next class. And we have a discussion related to this chapter. So everyone, please go to 12.2 discussion, and please read E textbook page 519 and discuss why artists choose same themes and depict the themes differently. Okay, any question?